This is episode 77 of the Why Not Me podcast, what I learned from 40 days of only God's voice. I'm your host, Danita Bremer. I'm a wife, mom, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a life coach. This podcast is for Latter-day Saint moms who want to be the best disciples of Christ they can be. Okay, so I got to meet a podcast listener in person yesterday, and I'm just truly honored when I hear that people are listening and sharing. And I appreciate every rating, review, and share of the podcast that you gift to me. I got to meet Mary, who was visiting the Denver Temple, and I live about 5 minutes away from the Denver Temple. And she arranged for me to come have some frozen lemonade with her and her husband. And it was so amazing to just meet new people that are interested in the same things that I'm interested in. And Mary told me she loves the podcast and her cousin is listening to it and she wants her sister to listen to it. Honestly, I am just so humbled and honored that little old me is creating something that perfect strangers are enjoying. So I hope the podcast is helping you. Today, I want to tell you about a recent experience that I've had. And let me just dive in and explain it. So on April, on April 17th, I decided to go on a 3-month social media sabbatical. And a few days after that, on April 20th, I was out walking and praying, talking to God. And I had this realization that if I'm going to do a social media sabbatical, I may as well go all in and not listen to any books or podcasts and really just block out all the other voices besides God's voice from my life. And as I was considering that, this idea of just do it for 40 days popped into my head. So from April 20th until May 30th, I did 40 days of, I was calling it my silent retreat, but it wasn't entirely silent. So I'm titling this podcast Only the Voice of God. Now, to be honest, it wasn't completely only the voice of God. I made an exception. I'm in a program with Brooke Snow, and I decided that her program is so Christ-centered, and I didn't want to fall 6 weeks behind. So I decided that I would allow myself to listen to the material and still be involved in that program. And occasionally I would find myself clicking on a link or, listening or reading something that I hadn't put rules around. So I didn't say that I couldn't check my email. I was still checking my email. And some of the things that I've subscribed to over the last few years, I just hadn't thought about, like, should this be part of my only the voice of God? And so sometimes I would find myself watching a video clip or reading an article. I did put no books, no reading books, and no listening to podcasts. Those were my two main ways of consuming information. So, there was some gray area there. But for the most part, it was really silencing all the outside voices. And because I'm so used to reading books and listening to podcasts almost like every waking moment, not entirely true, but like any moment, like if I'm washing dishes, if I'm cooking dinner, if I'm out walking, like if I just have any downtime, I'm probably listening to something or reading something. And so taking those two things away really increased the silence in my life. And but I just did want you to know that it wasn't like super, super strict. In fact, it was fascinating to watch myself because I don't really watch much TV or movies, and the rest of my family does. I've got 3 teenagers. My husband, he loves watching TV. Um, and when I started my business a few years ago, I consciously made the decision to step away from TV and but even before that, I didn't really watch too many movies. And so during this time, it was so interesting. I would be walking past my kids watching a TV show and I would just get totally sucked into it. Like my brain was so deprived from this like consumption that it would just want to watch anything and everything. Um, and my kids would tease me and they'd be like, Mom, you're not supposed to be watching TV. You're supposed to be having a silent retreat, because that's what I was calling it at first. And I just said, It's okay. I'm still human, right? Like I still live with people that aren't choosing to do this. So it was kind of funny. So I learned a few things, and I want to tell you about 5 things that I learned. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into 2 of them. So the first thing that I learned was that I'm right where I need to be. I think it's so common for us to think that we should be further ahead, or we should know more, or we should have already done this thing, or those kinds of things, all the shoulds, right? And when I really stepped into this space of slowing down, getting quiet, listening to God's voice, listening to my own voice, it became pretty clear to me that I was right where I needed to be, and I wasn't supposed to be anywhere else. It was really an exercise of presence in a lot of ways. And I just felt like I could look back on the last few years and the coaches that I've hired and the programs that I've joined and the things that I've learned, the books that I've read. It was kind of like it allowed me some space to reflect on all the things that I've been learning and to see how God has put them all in my path and that I'm right where I'm supposed to be. So now, when I'm tempted to tell myself that I should be further along, I just remember that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and that at any given point in time, I am doing my best and I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And it's not about like getting further along, right? It's about becoming more of who I want to become. And that is just, there are benchmarks of my own development. And it's not necessarily about time, right? It's about, am I ready for this right now? So that was really just grace filled for me to just look at myself with so much compassion and love and just be like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I love that thought. You can pick up that thought if you want to. The second thing is that it felt so spacious and tranquil. Like the first few days was sort of like, what am I going to do? And I'm going to be bored and all of that. And I just let myself fall into like, yeah, you might be bored and that's okay. And it felt just, like I said, so spacious, so quiet, so calm. And it really resonated with my soul. Like I am a calm, quiet, introverted, thoughtful person. And it just like matched me. So, one thing that I learned is about really what I need in terms of space and time and quiet and all of that, and how it fills me and it fuels me and it just feels so right to me. So, as I've come out the last few days from this 40 days of only God's voice, I've really I've allowed myself to pick up a book, to listen to some podcast episodes, but it's like there's a pause before I hit play or open the book. And I'm able to check in with myself a little bit more and ask, like, is this what I really need? And I think I got into a place before this 40 days where it was just habit and it was like almost like a distraction from everything. And I want to keep that. I want to keep that part where I'm really intentional and where I check in with myself and I slow down. I want to keep moments of where I don't have my AirPods in my ears and I'm not reading a book constantly, moments of downtime where it's just silent. That is a big lesson that I learned from this experience. Number 3 is that I wanted to say I'm very productive when I have limits around consumption, but I changed it to I'm very creative because I'm trying to change my language away from productivity, which is sort of the way our culture talks about creation, and really talk about it in times of being creative and um because that's what it is. It's not like we're just these machines that are supposed to be producing, producing, producing. We are creative beings. And really, what I created during this 40 days was a clean and spacious home. So I created some space in my own mind, in my own soul, but I also created space and cleanliness. Like I just like purged my entire house in my physical environment. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that those two things go together. Sometimes when we take action and we clean our homes or we get rid of things, we make space for new things, it creates some mental, spiritual space for us as well. And I always say that I am a creator of order. It's like one of my superpowers. And, you know, in the past, it has been in my home as far as like cleaning dishes and putting dishes away and cleaning up dinner and cleaning up the bookshelf and things like that. But I think it has so much more metaphor around it. And it felt so good. So, going into this 3-month social media sabbatical, I had decided that I'm either going to get my house totally in order and clean and all of that, or I'm going to make some headway in my business. And I was totally fine with either of those. If I didn't do anything in my business and all I did was clean my home, I was like, I'm on board with that. And this 40 days, I think I did a bit of both, but the home cleaning and the purging, I just really felt this desire, like I just need to go through every space and see what's there and get rid of things that we don't need anymore. It just, for me, it just feels so much lighter and more open. And I love the way that feels. So I was able to get lots of cleaning and purging done and lots of getting projects done. And I'm continuing that as well. And one thing that I noticed, one thing that I learned is when I very first started my business 3.5 years ago, one of the biggest obstacles was like, how do I do this? How do I have a business and have 3 kids and keep my house clean and get dinner on the table and like all the things that felt like they were my responsibilities and the tasks that I had to accomplish? It's like I couldn't wrap my mind around how I could do it all, how I could fit in one more thing, which was a big thing, and spend, 15 or 20 hours a week on this big business, right? And now, like taking social media out and taking like all the other voices and reading and podcasts and like a lot of just consumption, it makes me want to fill my time with things that I want to do, things that make me feel good in my home and in my space and in my business and with my family and all of that. I was totally able to stay on top of cleaning and just normal sort of everyday things. And it has shown me what is possible. I think so often we add things in, but we don't do as good of a job of subtracting things out. And this really showed me the power of subtracting things out of my life and prioritizing, and that I can do everything I want to do. I just have to decide and prioritize. So, number 4 and number 5, these are the ones that I want to spend a little bit more time on. One thing that I did when I went into this 40 days was I decided I could listen to Book of Mormon, I could listen to General Conference, and I could read or listen to anything that was um, really Christ-centered, came from God in my mind, right? So I picked up a book that I've been picking up and putting down for about 18 years, which is Jesus the Christ. And I was about 3/4 of the way through and I finished it in these 40 days. And at the same time, whenever I wanted to listen to something, I would listen to the Book of Mormon. So 40 days is just 2 days shy of 6 weeks, about halfway in. I don't really remember exactly when it was. I started listening to the Book of Mormon, and those two things, reading Jesus the Christ and especially finishing it, because I was at right before Christ's atonement and crucifixion in Jesus the Christ. And I had put it down and I hadn't read it for several years. So picking up at that point and listening to the Book of Mormon at the same time in the same period of about 3-4 weeks. So I think I started reading Jesus the Christ before I started listening to the Book of Mormon. And that was really powerful combination. And that goes along with the I'm right where I need to be. I think was just a tender mercy of God saying, hey, go pick up Jesus the Christ. Hey, what about listening to the Book of Mormon? Before that, I had started listening to the Saints, and I listened, and it was just sort of like a filler. Like, okay, I'm not going to listen to podcasts, but what can I listen to? And so I was like, oh, there's the Saints that I hear people are loving. And I started listening to it, but it just wasn't the timing for me. And then I switched to the Book of Mormon, and I was also reading this Jesus the Christ. And what I learned from those two things coming together, converging at the same time in my life, is that God's power is so much more than I thought, than I think most of us think, right? Listening to the Book of Mormon in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, it was like this huge zooming out of the Book of Mormon. And I could just see how God is so powerful. And we think as humans, we think that we're powerful. We think that we have strength, but we don't. And it's really all about God and his power. And I use God as a term loosely for like Jesus Christ, the Spirit, Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother, whatever. But I also learned that like Jesus Christ himself is so powerful. I completely gained a testimony of the atonement and of Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm going to cry, as my Redeemer, as my Savior, as the Son of God. Like I can't even put it into words. I just would highly recommend that everybody do this. Read Jesus the Christ, or flip to the point of the atonement and the crucifixion and everything that comes after at the same time of listening to the Book of Mormon. I don't know if that will do the same thing for you as it did for me, but for me, it's just like the lesson that I'm learning is God is so powerful. Jesus Christ is so powerful. It almost makes me think, well, why do I even need to do anything if they're so powerful? And I'm going to do another podcast episode on that. But yes, just complete testimony of God's power. And I'm excited to like learn more about that because I think I'm just beginning. And the last thing I learned, which kind of goes along with God's power and how I'm just learning how much more it really is than I thought, is to trust the Lord, trust in the Lord and trust the Lord. During this same time, I listened to this guided visualization meditation. I've probably mentioned it on the podcast before. As part of Brooke Snow's Creation Coach program, I was listening to her prosperity meditation. So if you go to the Brooke Snow podcast and you go to episode, I believe it's episode 78 or 79. Hold on. Let me just look it up for you really quick. But if you go to her podcast and you find that episode, and it's the title will have prosperity in it. At the end of that episode is a meditation. And so I was listening to this meditation. So it's episode 78. It's called Be Prosperous. So I've been listening to that meditation, well, at the time, at the very beginning of this 40 days, I was listening to that meditation probably every day for about 3 weeks. And it really is an exercise in trusting the Lord. So in the meditation, you put yourself in the place of the disciples on the night when Christ walks to them on water. So there's a big storm and you feel the storm. You just put yourself in that place. Imagine yourself in a boat with the waves splashing. It's cold, it's rainy, it's windy. And then you see Christ. And then you walk to him on water. Now, doing this every day for a few weeks really helped me to slow down and learn what it feels like to me to trust the Lord. That moment when I step out from the boat before my foot hits the water, that's the moment when I really have to trust and believe and allow Christ and allow his power to support and hold me. I cannot even explain to you how difficult that is for some of us. Trust is active. Sometimes we think it's like this passive thing where we just do it one time and then we're done. But from my experience, I have learned that it's very active and I have to trust over and over and over again. I have to let go. I have to relax over and over again. That is a beautiful lesson that I have learned from these 40 days that I never want to forget. And I want you to imagine an infant that falls asleep on your shoulder. That infant is like a limp noodle, right? And it's not a big deal because the infant is like, 10 or 20 pounds or whatever. Do we allow ourselves to fall asleep and to be as relaxed as an infant does when they fall asleep on our shoulder? For me, the answer is no. It's like, I'm like, oh, Christ, are you comfortable here? And I'm like tensing up and like, how can I make this easier? Right. And I'm just learning that it's all about relaxing it all and letting him carry it all. Like he is powerful enough to do that. He can carry that weight. It's so easy for him, right? That is a huge lesson that I've been learning is what does trust and trust in the Lord actually mean for me? And how does it feel in my body? Not just how does it feel as I think about it, right? It's like actually embodying that. So I've been learning how to really surrender and relax into Christ's power, letting him carry me, letting him take care of the burdens and the weights. Like, oh, that verse of all ye that are heavy laden, come unto me, right? Because my burden is easy. My burden is light. I don't have the verse in front of me, but you know what I'm talking about. I thought I was trusting Christ. I thought I was placing my burdens at his feet. And now it's like a whole new level of feeling myself, allowing myself to be carried, to be led, to be supported, to be held by him. It's not something I do in my life. I'm the one that carries and supports, right? I'm the mom, I'm the wife. And I don't allow a lot of space for myself to be carried and supported and held. And that is also something that I want to do more of. So, those are my 5 lessons from my 40 days of only God's voice, or mostly only God's voice. God's power is so much more than I thought. Trust in the Lord. I'm right where I need to be. It's a spacious and tranquil space. And I'm very creative when I have limits around consumption. These things are all available to you as well. And I encourage you to pray, to enter into conversation with God and ask Him what your next step is. Maybe it's doing something similar to what I've been doing, cutting social media out, cutting out a lot of the consumption in your life, or maybe it's something totally different. You have a different life than I do. You have different circumstances. You have different lessons that you've already learned and different lessons that you will learn. I don't know what God has in store for you, but I do know that all of this is available to you in some way. And I just really encourage you to pray and to ask Heavenly Father what it is for you that He wants you to move toward. What's the next step for you? And then trust that whatever comes up for you is the answer. I mean, it could be something silly like go get a drink of water. It could be that micro, or it could be focus on reading your scriptures or improve this relationship. It makes me think of President Nelson and how he said, what is the conflict inside of you and solve it? Ask the Lord what that conflict is, and then trust the answer that comes up and do it. Go, whatever it is, go do it. It might not be, you know, turning down all the voices and not engaging in as much consumption for you, but the principles, the learning experiences, you have your 5 or 10 or 20 things to learn. And I think the idea is just for you to enter into relationship with God and really trust Him and trust the answers that come up for you. That's enough for now, and so are you. If you enjoyed this episode, would you please give it a review and tell me your favorite takeaway? And if you're ready to overcome your obstacles and become the best disciple of Christ you can be, go to danitabrummer.com and schedule a free session with me. Until next time, go be you and follow the Spirit.